President, I rise in support of the bill. I would say that for the second time in about a week, I've come to the floor to speak after one of my friends on the other side was talking about what we ought to be talking about, and both times they were right. They said we should be talking about private sector job creation. But, Mr. President, I just say, where are the bills to do that with? We've been here the week of the 4th of July. We were here. We had 2 votes that week. One was to compel the senators who didn't show up to show up, and the other one was on some motion to proceed to cloture on something that had nothing to do with job creation or any of the other things that we should be talking about. We could talk about what we ought to be talking about, and that would be one thing, but of course what we are talking about today is the moment we have arrived at, the date that was set by the administration, and apparently they were right in speculating when we'd need to look at the borrowing limit again, and that's today. And I rise, Mr. President, in support of the bill. I said for months the only thing worse than not raising the debt limit would be raising the debt limit and not changing behavior. And in fact, I think that's what all the rating agencies that everybody's talking about now, whether they're going to, how they're going to rate our bond rating in the future, they've all said. And they said long before they talked about the debt limit that we're spending more money than we can afford to spend as a federal government or as a society. We're spending $1 out of $4 that the society can produce, and that's about 25% more than we spent in 2008. It's 25% more than we spent on the average from the 40 years from 2008 going backwards 4 decades. And that's important. And I think this bill does begin the process of changing behavior. The way we approached the debt limit this time was everything but business as usual. This is a totally different discussion than we've had before about the debt limit. And the country has almost always had debt. I think there have been only a couple of times in our history Andrew Jackson paid off the debt, and there was one other time when we paid off the debt. Only a couple of times in our history when we didn't have some kind of debt. And in the tradition of that debt, we've always just said, okay, let's borrow more money because we need more money. This time, for the first time, we said, why do we need more money? Why is it that we're increasing debt? Why is it that we're increasing debt so rapidly? We had a $10 trillion debt in January of 2009. 30 months later, we have a $15 trillion debt. Obviously, that trajectory can't continue, and the framework for the decision that's made in this bill says it won't continue. Now, we do continue to add debt over the next decade, but, Mr. President, we wouldn't have to. There's a study out that says if every time the debt ceiling comes up over the next 10 years, we'd make the same kind of determination that for every dollar we increase the debt ceiling, we're going to find $1 in savings over the next decade. That study would indicate that in 10 years we'd balance the budget. And of course that's what we should be doing, is balancing the budget. This body, before I served here, before I served in the House, before I was in the Congress at all, in 1995 came within 1 vote of the balanced budget amendment, 1 vote of passing the amendment that had passed the House. In 1996 it came within 2 votes of passing that same amendment that had passed the House again. And if that 1 vote would have changed in 1995, or the 2 votes would have changed in 1996, we wouldn't be having this discussion today, because we'd have a balanced budget today and would be moving in the way that every state but one has to function, and every family in America eventually has to come to grips with the fact that they can't spend more than they have. The truth is, Mr. President, that this agreement, while it's a 10-year agreement, is only enforceable for a couple of years. I believe we will do what this agreement says this year and next year. I'm hopeful and optimistic that the Select Committee will do its job and come back with another trillion and a half or more of cuts to spending, and that's going to happen. That select committee is going to report this year. The budget cap is set for this year and next year, but elections matter. And who's elected in 2012 to the House and the Senate and the presidency will finally and ultimately make a decision about whether this track that we're on now gets better than it is now, or frankly heads back in the other direction. The campaign pledges, Mr. President, I think are important. And while I support the bill, I'm also fully appreciative of everyone who feels like they can't. And frankly, if some campaign pledges hadn't been made in 2010, we probably wouldn't be at this moment today. And if that's somehow an extraordinary thing that people run for office and they say that's what they're going to do, and then they come here and do that, that is what the process is all about and how it's supposed to work. Is this my sense of what would have been the best way to deal with these spending cuts? We'd have more spending cuts if I was writing this bill. But you know, the fact is, in Washington today, no one party controls anything. My party, the Republican Party, controls 1/3 of what it takes to get a bill to become law. And the other party controls 2/3. And at the end of the day, by definition, nobody's going to be totally happy with this bill. But as Senator Pat Roberts said yesterday in a meeting I was in, using an old legislative saying, this is not the best possible bill, but it's the best bill possible. It is the best we can do right now. And I think we take this victory, use it as a way to move forward to the future. And Mr. President, I rise again in support of this bill.